I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking about how to deal with hormone imbalance, hot flashes. I had this a lot in my early 20s when I was later diagnosed with premature ovarian insufficiency. And we're talking about premature ovarian insufficiency or POI and how to keep positive, how to keep the faith with this diagnosis and keep searching for answers. Excited for you to listen. Hey everyone, excited to announce that Get Pregnant Naturally is now turning into a daily show. So we're still going to have our Monday show where we're going to have a deeper dive with functional medicine experts, natural fertility experts, mind-body experts, really interviewing the very best so that you can have the tools you need to help you improve your chances of pregnancy success with your own eggs. And now from Tuesday to Friday, we are going to be turning our show into a Q&A show. So we are taking your questions. This is called Ask the Fertility Experts. I'm going to be recording the answers to your questions with a member of my team. So Dr. Tabitha Barber, she's triple board certified in obstetrics, gynecology, menopause, and functional medicine. We are taking your questions live on the show here. So if you've got a question, all you need to do is go to Fab Fertile Inc. That's my Instagram, Fab Fertile Inc. Instagram. Send me a DM, send me your question. Dr. Tabitha and I will answer your question live here on the podcast. We can either, use your name, your first name, or you can just have an anonymous question. You just let me know. And so excited to really give you benefits of having, a set of eyes here on your questions so that you can improve your chances of pregnancy success. So this is going live tomorrow. So excited for you to listen and take care. I regularly speak with 5 to 10 couples per week who are struggling to have their baby. And although we want to help everyone, we only have 4 spots available per month to work with us. I would like to invite you and your partner to a Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery Call. And this call is for you if you meet at least one of these criteria. You've been trying to get pregnant for at least 2 years. You've been through at least one failed IUI or IVF. This calls for action takers. If you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. If you're seriously considering working with us, go to Fab Fertile, F-A-B Fertile, and click on Book a Free Call. That's Fab Fertile, F-A-B Fertile, and click on Book a Free Call. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. One theme that keeps coming up with the couples in our Fab Fertile Couples Coaching Program is sleep. Whether it's insomnia, having a hard time falling asleep, waking up at night, or feeling tired when we wake up, sleep is critical for fertility and hormones. And that's why I'm so excited to have Blue Blocks as our podcast sponsor. So we're exposed to blue and green light from our phones, our tablets, our computers, indoor lights, and more. And this exposure impacts our melatonin production. And melatonin is essential for both female and male fertility. It helps determine the frequency and duration of our cycle and impacts sperm. There's lots of blue light blocking glasses on the market, but the ones from Blue Blocks, they've actually compared other popular brands, and Blue Blocks block 100% of blue and green light, while other brands fall short. So I have their sleep glasses. They have red lenses, and the ones I have are a little translucent frame, and they're so stylish and really cool. And so they eliminate 100% of the blue and green light in the 400 nanometer to 550 nanometer range. So this is the exact range that has been shown in clinical studies to disrupt melatonin and negatively impact your sleep. So all you do is wear your sleep glasses after sunset until it's time for bed, and you'll notice improved sleep after just one use. And it's also cool to use when you're flying for managing jet lag. I got to say, I was a little skeptical about the noticing improvement after one use, but literally I use these glasses and my sleep is actually already pretty good. I used them for one day, and I have to say, after one day, I had the best sleep of my life. I just felt so rested. So these glasses, they ship free and they're tracked for all orders anywhere in the world. And also they have all their frames come in prescription, non-prescription, and reading glasses. Plus you can send in your frames and they'll add the blue light blocking and green light blocking lenses to your frame. So this is an easy hack that you can add to your fertility toolkit. All you do is go to BlueBlocks, BlueBlocks.com. Use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast at checkout and receive a 15% discount. That's BlueBlocks, BlueBlocks.com, and use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast to receive your 15% discount. Hey there. Thanks so much for listening to the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast. And I've got a favor to ask you. If you are enjoying learning about the functional approach to fertility, consider going to iTunes and rating and reviewing the podcast. This is how it helps the show reach more people that are struggling with infertility, knowing that there's another approach that really can get to the bottom of why it's not working in the first place. So all you need to do is, if you're on the app or the desktop, just go in and consider leaving a 5-star rating and leave a review. And there is step-by-step instructions in the show notes showing you exactly how to do that. So if you can just take a few minutes, just take the few minutes right now. You can pause this recording, come back, leave the review. It would really mean the world to me and help others that are on the fertility journey as well. Take care. I didn't need to go to donor eggs. Obviously, I don't regret it. I have beautiful children. I could have done things differently, restored. I was still cycling back in my 20s. I could have looked at my health, the environmental toxins, the stress I was under.
Many women are being told their eggs are too old. That's often merely an assumption that's not based on actual evidence. The reason being that there is no direct test of egg quality. You can't test egg quality.
It's the man who's got a food sensitivity or he has a zinc deficiency.
Like, there can be a root cause to these symptoms that are, quote unquote, period problems, that the doctor will pass you a pill without any question of why.
And some part of you knows that if you can reframe your journey from not want to struggle, or if it is struggle, learn how to embrace the struggle. Learn how to embrace it.
Most conditions in the child occur during the 9 months of development. It's the genetic switches are turned on or turned off, and they're pre-programmed. So you are in such a powerful, amazing position to do amazing things for your kids.
Why is IVF the first step? Because we believe it should be the last step. Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Hey there, I'm Sarah Clark, founder of Fab Fertile and your host. I believe the functional approach is the first step for anyone struggling with infertility, and my aim is to help you get pregnant naturally. Today, I'm welcoming Dr. Kirstie Cunningham to the podcast, and we're digging into how to deal with hormone imbalance, hot flashes, and premature ovarian insufficiency, or POI. Dr. Cunningham graduated from Duke University and attended medical school at Wake Forest School of Medicine. After receiving her medical degree, she went on to complete her internship at Aurora Sinai Medical Center. She performed her residency at Mercy Hospital and Medical Center, and she's a board-certified physician specializing in obstetrics, gynecology, and she's also the assistant professor at Morehouse School of Medicine, where she serves as a director of maternal child health, and she frequently attends classes and seminars to stay abreast of the latest technological advancements in her field. So thanks so much for listening. I'm so thankful that you're here. Make sure you hit subscribe, and if you know someone else who is on the fertility journey, please share this podcast with them. Hey, Dr. Kirstie, excited to have you on the podcast.
Hi, I am so happy to be here. How are you, Sarah?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful this morning. I'm so glad it's a nice, cool morning here in Atlanta. How is it there in Canada?
Yeah, it's definitely, well, actually it's spring's coming along. It's probably, well, we're in Celsius, so it's like 5 degrees, so whatever that is, 40s, but it's supposed to be a nice day, so 50s, which is good.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. So, if you can really share your journey of how you came to do this work. And you were saying before we were chatting there that you've been doing this for more than 20 years. So, just share how you got into this work.
Oh, yes. Well, back when I was in college, I started having hot flashes, except I didn't know that they were hot flashes at the time. And actually, I can dial back to when I was in high school. When I was in high school, I was having irregular periods. And actually, my periods actually didn't come. And my mom took me to her gynecologist, and they were scratching their heads and like, we're going to have to do some studies. We're going to have to do all this blood work and, all this tests. And I think I was a senior in high school at the time, and they did all these tests. Everything was normal. I don't know what they were doing. I was a high school student, but everything was normal. And they gave me some pills I'm a senior in high school. I didn't know what they were doing. And they just said, here, take these, just take these every day. From my recollection, it was estradiol. Now, so I took this estradiol. So now I'm in college taking estradiol every day. Now I remember going to student health on one occasion, and the student health doctor was like, what are you on these for? And I'm like, well, my doctor told me to take these every day. It's like, you don't need these. He threw them in the trash can. So I was like, okay. That was, I think that may have been my freshman or sophomore year. So I was really confused as to, I never knew what my diagnosis was, but, the doctor's like, oh, well, you may have a little difficulty getting pregnant, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't care. I wasn't trying to get pregnant. That was just like, who's trying to do that? I'm going to be a doctor. So whatever. But later on, no one was thinking about that. So later on in my college career, I noticed that when I was running the class and the campuses were far apart. There was the East Campus, West Campus, North Campus, Central, And when the bus would take me from one campus and I would just get to the other campus just in time to line up for this, I took this African dance class and I would just slide into formation just in time. It would get me there just in time. And so I would just be overcome with this intense heat. And I was just, I thought it was just because I had just run over there, from the bus stop. I thought it was normal. And, but it would every single time. And it would just hit me about 30 seconds or so, a minute or so after I had stood in line. So that went on. And then, it was just these things that just stand out in my mind that went on and on without me ever having a diagnosis. And I remember a time when my two younger brothers came to visit me in my on-campus apartment. They kept telling me it was cold in the apartment. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's not cold in here. So they ended up calling home to Atlanta. So we're in North Carolina. They ended up calling home to Atlanta and telling my mom that I had the apartment so cold and I wouldn't turn the thermostat down. And they're like, Mom, she's freezing us. And my mom was like, Kirstie, could you please turn thermostat down? Your brothers are cold. I'm like, it's not cold in here, I promise you. So I didn't know I was flashing, but that's what was going on. I really didn't think it was, I was having hot flashes and I didn't know it. And it really was not cold in the apartment. I didn't know. But anyway, so that was my beginning. That started my journey. And years later, I met my husband. When we decided to, we went on a birth control pill first, not knowing I didn't need it. We're like, oh, we're going to plan this thing. We don't want to get pregnant right away. Not even knowing I didn't even need it. But we stopped it because I said, hey, I'm eating all the time. This is ridiculous. I'm gaining weight, vanity, ridiculous. But I stopped it after about 6 months and no period. Well, guess what? I was only having 2 periods a year anyway, my whole life. That's just always how it's been. And went to the doctor and they did another workup, sent me to a reproductive endocrinologist. Okay, so this is my first time seeing a reproductive endocrinologist. So now, when I was married. So then that's when they did like the infertility workup and decided, oh, yeah, you have premature ovarian failure and you're not going to be able to get pregnant. And back then they called it premature ovarian failure. Now we call it premature ovarian insufficiency. That's how old I am. They did a whole lot of other tests and we went through this whole workup and, then they offered us different options. We could go through ovarian stimulation, which probably wouldn't work. in premature ovarian failure, because with that, you really don't have the eggs there, but we could try it. Of course, I'm going to try it, So I tried that. It did not work. And so then the other option was donor eggs. So we went that route. This was the next thing. So now I'm in residency. No, I'm in medical school. We tried the donor eggs and it failed. Okay. We went through that whole process and it was not covered by insurance, I will say. Now, I'm a student in medical school. It was very expensive. And donor eggs and IVF is not cheap. It's anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000. So that happened. But anyway, that was back in probably 95-ish, 97, somewhere around there, 98. But anyway, that was then. I went on through residency. I just prayed about it and I just knew that it was just going to happen one day, spontaneously. It did. I just knew it would. 4 years later, I'm in residency and I'm on call. Actually, what happened was, did we say I was an OBGYN? Yeah, we said, right?
Yep,
okay,
I got your bio. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm on call one night, still in training. I went ahead and tested myself because I was having these weird symptoms. Like, I didn't get a period anyway. So I was like, okay, that can't count that. But I was having nausea and just extremely tired. And I was just really cold, which was very unusual for me.
Right.
And I knew just those are nonspecific symptoms of pregnancy. And you know how moms have this kind of intuition sometimes. And it was the weirdest thing because my husband and I had just taken this Thanksgiving trip to St. Thomas. And when we went to I think we were going to pick them up or something. We stopped by their house on the way to the airport. And she says, no, don't pick up that suitcase because you haven't had children yet. And we're on the way to the airport. It was just the weirdest comment. And so when we get to St. Thomas, I was just really lethargic and I felt like I had just been run over by a truck. It was 98 degrees in St. Thomas and I was freezing cold and I was grumpy. I was just not myself. I was grumpy, I was cold, and I didn't have an appetite. And I just was like, something is really off. I was like, could it be it was just that, that little tiny, could it be, And so when I got back home, and went back to work at the hospital, I tested myself one night when I was on call and it was 2 a.m. and the test said positive. And I'm sitting there looking at the result on the computer and I'm staring at it. And I'm like, what? Is this real? And I called my husband and I told him what he said. And so he, he's relying on my expertise. And so, and, he's, wondering, okay, so what do we make of this? And I'm like, well, I guess that means we're pregnant. I'm like, I guess that, so I called my doctor in the morning and told her. And so then we got an ultrasound, a quantitative HCG to see, the level. And then we got an ultrasound and there she was, 7 weeks and 1 day.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what happened actually the first time. And so when it happened that time, I said, hey, I told my doctor, I said, look, since my ovary decided to work right now, my ovaries, can we do some Clomid and kick out another egg real quick while it's working? And so, but then I went into failure again. I started having hot flashes and everything. So I don't know, my ovaries, they were just doing weird things. But we know that young women that are in premature ovarian failure, which is why I believe they changed the name to premature ovarian insufficiency, they can have spontaneous ovulation.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened. That really piqued my interest in OBGYN and reproduction. So here I am.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's quite a story. I'm not sure if you know my journey where I was diagnosed with premature ovarian insufficiency or failure at 28. So a similar thing. And I went off and had my kids with donor eggs. And then years later discovered food sensitivities and gut infections and chronic stress, the root cause. And then we were helping couples with, low AMH and high FSH and POI and DOR. But yeah, similar to you, it was like, it literally, when I'm writing down your little story here, and I'm like, yep, I was in HR at the time, same thing. I was like so embarrassed because I thought I was just blushing all the time. I was always had this red face and sitting there just like fanning myself thinking I had a horrible blushing problem. And then like the irregular periods, same for me. They came like, it was twice a year. I had like in my early 20s, I thought that was a great thing. And then, I was diagnosed with this at 28. And then, the same thing. So I didn't get a second opinion. I was like, okay, it's donor eggs. And I went that way. And we were lucky enough on the first fresh transfer for both our kids to my daughter's 19 and my son's 16. And then my health took a nosedive, years later. And that's when I discovered the whole functional approach. And so, it's like, I don't come across, and it's interesting because, Dr. Kirstie's in my mastermind, and also, Dr. Anna Kabeka, which I've had on my podcast. And I don't really, in my everyday occurrences, come across a lot of people. Obviously, we're working with people that have these diagnoses, but I don't typically come across, and I'm like, well, that's really strange that two OBGYN doctors in my mastermind both have POI. And I'm like, how weird. I don't know. Because as I say, like this diagnosis that is, it's becoming more common. I'm not sure what the stats are on it. Like, is it like, I think it's under 10% or is it 4%? I'm not quite sure the exact stats of people that have POI.
They say it's about 1 in 250.
Okay.
Under 35 and 1 in 100 under age 40. So yeah, I'm not sure what the stats are under 30, which is where you and I are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just think people get that diagnosis and they're automatically told donor eggs, and like you and I, and then yours, as you said, it was like it for you. You just had this faith that would work. I had a similar thing where I just knew I'd be a mother. I didn't really, and some people get kind of caught in that where they don't think anything will work and they feel in a very kind of dark hole. I had a lot of faith that I would be a mother. And it sounds like you had a lot of faith too in there, like prayed and that kind of.
Exactly. That's definitely true. And I think that speaks to the emotional aspect of infertility. I think that's what, that held me up emotionally. And I didn't have a lot of what a lot of people go through with infertility. I try and remind people when couples get married and you see that they have not had a child or gotten pregnant, and you know how couples say, oh, when are y'all going to have kids? When are y'all going to have kids? I hate to see people do that, because it could be that they are actually trying and there's actually a problem there. And that could actually be hurtful. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Because they could actually be having problems. And it wasn't hurtful to me because I was like, hey, I know it's going to happen one day, so it's not an issue. But for some people, that could actually be more scars on top of that wound. And so I think people should be more mindful of that when they see couples that have not had kids. That's all.
Yeah, I agree. Like changing the conversation, because it's a seemingly like it's an innocuous comment, kind of like, how's the weather? Oh, when are you going to have kids? It's sort of just a conversation starter. But when people that are struggling, that's just kind of like a complete trigger for some people. For me, it wasn't a trigger for me.
Right.
Although like at the time, like all my, I had a circle of about, 10 girlfriends. They were all literally popping babies all And I was like, yeah, I'm like, what about me? And I'm like weighing the donor eggs and all that. So, and a big planner. So it was definitely difficult. And so as far as now, like your take on the conventional approach to POI, POF, like what would you do differently? Any kind of lessons learned from your journey?
Well, with the conventional approach, the main thing, sometimes it's easy to actually miss the diagnosis. If you're not careful. And the reason is because sometimes it's very tricky because these women can have periods. And if you're thinking, okay, well, they have periods, so maybe they're not in POI, or they're not having vasomotor symptoms such as the hot flashes, or they're not having vaginal dryness. So maybe it's not premature ovarian insufficiency, but we just, you have to remember that these women, sometimes they don't have these symptoms or they don't have them consistently. So sometimes it can be a little tricky to diagnose or diagnose early. So that's one thing. And the other thing I think sometimes we have to focus on is their diet. And sometimes we forget that. And the reason is because these women are at risk for bone fractures, with premature ovarian failure and premature ovarian insufficiency with the low estrogen. We should counsel them to increase their calcium and increase their vitamin D, right? The other thing we have to think about with these women, in addition to the emotional support that I just mentioned, and is their sexual health. So those are some of the things that I think we oftentimes don't think about with premature ovarian insufficiency that we need to focus on. Not only do you have the vaginal dryness, but you have just, you can have the decreased libido that you have in the normal menopausal women.
Yeah, it's interesting with that. I know. So for me, it was probably the last 5 years, just painful sex, literally like a freaking dagger every time. And I actually discovered Dr. Anna Quebecca's, her Julva, which if anyone's experiencing painful intercourse, there's a link in my resources section for Julva, which is, an amazing vaginal cream. So definitely to check that out. That's been a game changer for me. And then, yeah, the whole, I know, because I think it's and it's interesting with the low vitamin D, because we see a lot of people that have low vitamin D just in general with people that are dealing with infertility. And then, is it autoimmune issues, or there's other gut issues, or we see a theme with premature ovarian insufficiency with non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which definitely is the case for me. So we see that a lot with people being off the chart with gluten. So that's to dig into that. And so is there any other lessons learned? So kind of typically with conventional side of things, they're diagnosed later, which that was the case for me. Similar to you, I was put on the birth control pill, and I didn't have any side effects from that, but I was trying to have it clear up my acne, which it didn't. Yeah. And the diet piece, I didn't change my diet until years later. I had no clue about, I was told about, making sure to have the calcium and stuff like that. So I drank lots of milk, but it turns out I was super intolerant to milk. And then the emotional support, when I look back, I was okay, I got this diagnosis, off I go. And, I thought I wasn't stressed, but how ridiculous. Right. And I will obviously assume for you, I'm not sure if you look back with the stress piece, I would assume going through medical school probably be stressful, but did you feel you were stressed at that time?
I would say there was a little, I wasn't stressed about the diagnosis itself. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because what was stressful to me was the coordination of all of the, whatever I had to do, trying to all the little pieces. Okay. Because going in to get this shot and that shot, mm-hmm. and going to this appointment and that appointment, and still medical school. Yeah. Okay. That was stressful. But, when I was doing that during medical school, yes, that was stressful. And, I gave myself the shots. So that was added stress, of course. But, after we went through that whole process and it did not work, yeah, that was a bit of a downer, I would say. Mm-hmm. But, that was when I said, okay, you know what? I'm just going to pray about it. I'm just going to let it go. And that was that. Then I wasn't stressed about it anymore. Mm-hmm. I always said, think about all the money I saved in birth control. And I saved a ton of money.
Yeah, I have that like weird sense of humor too, where I look back and I'm like, okay, yeah, I like have a complete mindset shift. And I actually thought people that had to go through IVF, because I did the donor egg side, that they had to use their own eggs and, struggle for years. I thought I had it worse off I thought they had it worse off than me. And I had like done that mindset shift. Although people would think that, using donor eggs would be like, your last step. For me, I had a whole mindset shift that I just thought other people had it worse than I did. And, I was lucky enough. It doesn't always work for people like yourself with the donor eggs. It doesn't always work. So I was lucky enough it worked. And so is your take on the business of IVF, like globally, the industry is estimated to be worth like 25 billion, predicted to grow to 41 billion by 2026. Like this is big business. What's your take on IVF? And yeah.
Well, I think IVF is a great option for some couples, and sometimes is actually the only option for some couples, depending on their situation. I mean, yeah, it is a growing business, and that's only because infertility itself, there's so many things that are leading to infertility, or so many causes of infertility that we're finding. But as I tell my patients every day, you only need one ovary, one tube, and a uterus to get pregnant. However, if you have total blockage, you're going to need some IVF. And those patients, IVF is a great choice. And it's a great choice for patients that want to use their own biological input, rather than, go to adoption, or rather than, go to donor eggs. So it's the step before, if they want to do that before donor eggs. So yeah, it's a great option.
And what about preconception health? Like it's interesting with, I had a Dr. Ben Lynch on. He's an expert in MTHFR and talks a lot about that. And he was talking about, why do we spend 12 to 18 months planning our wedding, and then we were like, oh, we want to get pregnant on month one. Like, why don't we switch that around? And maybe 12 to 18 months might be like way too long for someone to think of focusing on preconception health. But I think sometimes I had no clue that I needed to work on my preconception health. We say like a minimum of 6 months. What's your take to have people as they prepare for their baby?
Right. I would say, preconception, I always counsel patients a minimum of 90 days. Mm-hmm. And, because you want to be on the folic acid. Folic acid helps to prevent neural tube defects. I put all patients that walk into my door that are planning to get pregnant on folic acid. So we talk about STDs, STD prevention. We talk about smoking. So the other thing, if you're smoking, you want to stop smoking. If you are drinking alcohol, you certainly want to stop. And this is for the partner too. Mm-hmm. And if the partner is smoking in the house, you want to ask them to not smoke in the house. So we go through all of that. We also go through risk factors. So yeah.
Yeah. And then I was just reading on your blog there, you had some talking about African American women and infertility, and then studies showing, that African American women are twice as likely to be infertile with compared to Caucasian females. Can you talk about that disparity and what you're seeing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, Black women do have higher rates of infertility compared to other races. A lot of that is attributed to, it could be utilization of healthcare resources. Some of that is due to access to healthcare. And then some of that is actually due to medical issues such as fibroids. It may be due to diabetes. It may be due to polycystic ovarian syndrome or in ovulatory cycles. We know that the African American population is at least 2 times more likely to have, or at least, twice as likely to have or how should I say this, double increased prevalence of non-insulin dependent diabetes compared to the United States white population or non-Hispanic population. So yes, it's double. And that right there will increase their infertility. Also, if you look at African American patients, and, the acanthosis nigricans, which is that dark area in the back of the neck. So this is a sign of insulin resistance in skin. So that is just it's a skin marker.
Okay, I never heard of that.
Yeah. So that's just it's a marker. It's a sign of higher prevalence of non-insulin dependent diabetes. So if you look, it looks like thickened, darker skin, and you see it mostly in African Americans. It's common in the back of the neck. So there are many different causes, but it is more common in African Americans. And if you look at, there was a study that was done when they looked at American Indians, Alaskans, Caucasian Americans, and different races, and by far and large, African American women had the highest rate of infertility. So yes.
Yeah. So they're thinking, is it like diabetes, fibroids, or is it access to medical care? It's, I guess, the combination of all those things.
Exactly.
Anything, I don't know what is as far as kind of helping with that, or like what are any kind of suggestions for to change that? I don't know what you've got.
Yeah, so probably needs to be some grants available for African American women for infertility, IVF. Mm-hmm. That would be great.
Yeah, I don't know if Resolve, the National Infertility Awareness Association, I'm not sure if that's the exact acronym, but Resolve, I wonder if they're doing anything with this. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a good question.
And then, so your take on bioidenticals. Anything you'd like to say there?
I love bioidentical hormones. Mm-hmm. Actually use them myself. They work very well. That is one of the modalities that I use. I use a variety. And it really just depends on what best suits the patient. But bioidentical hormones, I like the pellet-based ones because we're able to dose them according to the level of the according to the patient's hormone level, and get it just specific to them. So that's why I like them. And so we're able to target a specific range, and we usually don't miss when we use the pellets, and they feel good usually when they come back in 6 weeks. So that's why I like them. The other thing with bioidentical hormones is that they are plant-based. Mm-hmm. They're great in that because they're plant-based and natural, they decrease your inflammatory markers. So they actually help with the whole cardiovascular profile. They reverse. So if you think about when a menopausal woman ages, your lipid profile starts flipping. So you get an increase in your LDL and you get a decrease in your HDL, which is what you don't want, which increases your risk of cardiovascular disease. That's what happens naturally. Well, and then you also get an increase in your inflammatory markers. But with the bioidentical hormone therapy, and because it's natural and not synthetic, you get a reverse in that. And so it becomes more, and because it's testosterone and not synthetic, it reverses and becomes more like it was before. And you get an increase in the HDL and the decrease in this LDL and a decrease in those inflammatory markers, which actually helps that cardiovascular profile. So there are extra benefits other than decreasing these hot flashes and, decreasing the vaginal dryness, and of course, increasing your sex drive and all that. So you get other benefits too that you don't see and feel.
Mm-hmm. Because I think some people are struggling, suffering in silence, where there's things that can help them. I think the bioidentical has potentially got a bad rap, but there's the way to do it properly.
Exactly. And if it's dosed, I feel like if it's dosed correctly, and if it's monitored correctly and done right, then it's a really good thing. but it has to be monitored correctly for sure.
And so do you have any resources you'd recommend, a favorite book or website or an app or a documentary, anything that you're obsessed with right now?
There's a book by Gary Donovitz, and it's called Age Healthier, Live Happier.
And how do you spell his last name?
Donovitz, Donovitz, and it's Age Healthier, Live Happier, Avoiding Over-Medication Through Natural Hormone Balance.
Great. I'll have that in the show notes. And is there a success story, anything with fertility that comes to mind you'd like to share? Obviously yours.
I think I'm the biggest success story.
And you have got a free download here for the listeners. So 9 easy ways to end hot flashes. And the link is at, I'll have that in the show notes. So Menopology, menopolgy.com. And what can they expect in that guide?
Yeah. menopology.
Great. And so what can they expect?
Okay. So with menopology.com, what they'll see is they'll get 9 or 8 easy ways to end hot flashes. And so these are things that you can do at home, things that, that is not any medication, but you can start these things right now. Ways to decrease your stress. So these are little things that you can do at work, little reminders. For instance, if you're at work, just remember to de-stress. Take a 60-second break and do deep breathing exercises, because we all get so stressed at work. You may not have time to take a 15-minute break, but you can stop, just do a deep breather. Or some of us are in management positions and we feel like we have to do it all. We have to learn to delegate. And then we have to remember, if we're driving or commuting, leave 20 minutes early. And that can often decrease our stress. So, and then there's a few other reminders there. I also talk about caffeine and give some suggestion of teas that will substitute for caffeine, because we know that caffeine is a huge trigger for hot flashes. So there are some teas in there that will, caffeine-free teas, that will give you the pep, but without the caffeine.
Yeah, I love that. I think so many people, I know for me, like I used to drink a lot of coffee, and not a lot, but it just, when I had it, it did not agree with me. It just made me a little bit bananas. Yeah. And sort of to see which is right for your body, but definitely for fertility to be taking that out. So that's good. You've got some tips for that. And yeah, the whole thing about arriving early, I'd literally be like rushing out the door, then you're rushing to get there. And then you're like in a lather when you arrive, and what's the point? Obviously now we're doing more Zoom meetings, so you've got to run down the hall to the computer, but still, you don't want to be late.
Exactly. And we know that stress is a big trigger of hot flashes.
Yes.
Yeah. So it really helps to do a schedule, put everything in your schedule, color code it, do whatever you have to do, plan some me time, put your me time in there the same way you would do your other meetings, and leave 20 minutes earlier. Put your 20-minute departure time in there.
I love it. So any final thoughts, Dr. Kirstie, on our chat today?
Well, I would say to anyone with premature ovarian insufficiency, just know that if you're trying to get pregnant, that it is still possible. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at me. It happened twice. So, I would say keep trying, keep the faith, and just, try not to get discouraged. Do whatever you have to do and just keep going for it. Stay positive.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your words of wisdom and really sharing your story on that. I think it's so impactful to hear people that have gone through this and really, it's not, had a positive outcome. So thank you for sharing that and all the work that you're doing over the years with helping people and women on the fertility journey, or as they say, getting healthy. So thank you so much for coming on, Dr. Kirstie.
Okay. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
I regularly speak with 5 to 10 couples per week who are struggling to have their baby. And although we want to help everyone, we only have 4 spots available per month to work with us. I would like to invite you and your partner to a Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery Call. And this call is for you if you meet at least one of these criteria. You've been trying to get pregnant for at least 2 years. You've been through at least one failed IUI or IVF. This calls for action takers. If you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. If you're seriously considering working with us, go to FabFertile, F-A-B Fertile, and click on Book a Free Call. That's FabFertile, F-A-B Fertile, and click on Book a Free Call. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. Melatonin is important for female fertility. It helps regulate hormones and maintain the body's circadian rhythms. Plus, it helps determine the frequency and duration of the menstrual cycle. Plus, it impacts sperm count and motility. Blue and green light negatively impact our melatonin production. That's why we recommend Blue Blocks, blue and green light sleep glasses to all our one-to-one clients. Simply go to Blue Blocks, BLUBLOX.com, and use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast at checkout to receive your 15% discount. That's BlueBlocks, BLUBLOX.com, and use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast. The Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, including show notes and links, provides information with respect to healthy living, nutrition, lab testing, and is intended for informational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor is it to be construed as such. We cannot guarantee that the information provided on the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast reflects the most up-to-date medical research. Information is provided without representation or warranties of any kind. Please consult a qualified physician for medical advice and always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health and nutrition program.